Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Understanding Life and Disability Insurance with Nathan Swab and our guest speaker, Adam Lemke of Ward and Connolly. My name is Eric Danielson. I'm the Communications and Client Services Administrator for AFP. We will be recording this webinar and recording future webinars as well. We'll host a Q&A session afterwards, and then we will stop the video before the Q&A, and the video for this webinar will be posted on our website within the next couple days. So in order to make sure the chat, everything runs smoothly, we've disabled everybody's videos and muted their mics. So if you do need to ask any questions, just go ahead and post them in the chat. Instructions are on the screen. So if you have any suggestions for future webinars, we encourage you to post those in the chat as well, or you can shoot us an email or give us a call. So with that being said, I will hand things off to Adam and Nathan.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our September webinar. We're pleased today to be joined by Adam Lemke of Ward and Connolly Insurance. So today we're going to be discussing the basics of both life and disability insurance, and hopefully we'll come away with a better understanding of how they work. So let's start off with disability insurance. And Adam, why don't you explain to us how this works?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be talking to you all today about disability and life insurance. Um, yeah, starting off with how disability insurance works, and just to go through what's stated because I think it is important in the first bullet point. Disability insurance very plainly provides a monthly benefit to you, income tax free, and that is done whenever you're unable to work due to being considered disabled. Now, the big thing, and we do life and disability insurance, is when are you considered disabled? For life insurance, it's really easy come claim time, you're
Yeah.
alive or not. Disability insurance, it gets a little bit more complicated, and we have another slide to talk about, some of the very intricacies that you have and why it's important to have someone educated. The main components to disability insurance, obviously the monthly benefit, how much are you going to get? And that's normally tied to your income. The more income you have, the more benefit you could get. But unlike life insurance, there's a lot more financial underwriting here because they don't want you to be overinsured. And so, knowing your income, knowing your job, how much you get in bonus, very important information when you're deciding how much disability insurance you might need. Benefit period, also important. How long would you actually get the benefit? Um, our experience, and I think the industry's experience, is a barbell effect where you have a lot of claims that are really short in time, maybe never make it past the elimination period, and some claims that go for a very long amount of time. Of course, there's people in the middle, but you more often see the two extremes. And so you want to make sure you have a benefit period that really addresses that long tail risk because that's the more significant one. Definition of disability, obviously, this is where we have another slide for it, but when are you considered disabled? All this other stuff is great, but it only applies once you're considered disabled. So when does that occur? And then the last bullet point, elimination period. How long do you have to qualify as disabled before you start receiving benefits? Also, set as a time deductible.
Mhm.
And the one important thing for disability insurance, as opposed to life insurance, again, life insurance, easy come claim time, and there's almost no exclusions. Disability insurance, there's a lot of exclusions sometimes, and the contractual language is extremely important when deciding what coverage to go with, how your group coverage works. And again, it's just important that you have someone educated on the topic to review it and make sure that it fits your occupation and your specific situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good information. So just one question, like on benefit period, how long should somebody be thinking about with that? So we know you mentioned the barbell, as far as the length of claims, what are we talking about, like with the long-term claims?
Yeah, the default I'd say on policies is benefits payable to your age 65. But really, we have clients that, maybe they're 50 and they hope to retire early in 5 years. Well, you're not, you're trying to ensure the loss of your income, and your loss of income becomes less important once you're financially independent, which for that example is in 5 years. So maybe you could look at a different benefit period to better match your needs.
Okay, so each person really needs to look at this individually. Do I need, to age 65, for example, or just a set shorter period of time?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good.
So what is a disability? So there's different definitions in a policy, and they all rhyme with one another, but they are all slightly different. But when are you considered disabled? There's what's called own occupation, and there's a couple different tiers that it's important you review to make sure you fit the one that applies to you and your policy. But the idea is you're disabled if you can't do your own occupation, specifically tied to you, as opposed to policies with any occupation. As the name implies, you're unable to do any occupation, including your own. And when you see any occupation, what is considered any occupation is also up for discussion. If you're looking at Social Security disability insurance, any occupation is described as any occupation in the US economy. And that's obviously a much higher bar to be considered disabled for compared to if it's any job you're reasonably qualified to do. Um, Partial disability, also important. Not every disability is a total and incomplete ability to do your job. And in fact, in speaking with principal, they told us about 80% of their claims at one point or another is a partial disability.
Hmm.
So the example we've had was a client we worked with was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's,
Hmm.
and the neurologist recommended a reduction in hours from 40 to 20 hours a week. And with that, the pay was cut in half. And so it's not the inability to do your occupation, but to do it at the same time, same duties, and at the same income as before. And the partial disability steps in to help there.
Hmm.
It also steps in the inverse. Say you're a dentist, coming off a 3-year disability. Well, your clients have probably gone elsewhere, and you got to rebuild that client book, and it takes time. Even though you're back to your occupation full time, your income hasn't come back, and the partial disability kicks in then too. So it's
Hmm.
probably the second most important part behind when you're considered disabled in a policy.
Yeah. So obviously there are a lot of, there's a lot of shades of gray here where you can fall in different areas. So a partial disability equals a partial benefit payment.
Correct. Yeah. Typically tied to the income loss you experienced. If you
Hmm.
lost 40% of your income, you get 40% of your benefit.
Okay. And this is going to be the part where each policy could be a little bit different, or each carrier could be a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. And on most policies, you actually had to select the level of partial disability you want on the policy.
Wow.
And you almost always do the highest end one because of how important it is. So
Hmm.
much so that if we submit an application without that box checked for the rider, the insurance company is calling us just to double check we really meant that because everyone does
Wow.
it.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it's important, but it's still a option you could select or not select.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is definitely an area where somebody's expertise is really important. Wow. So, and then own occupation and any occupation as well. Each company and carrier is going to define those a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I would say in general, your group policies that you get through work are
Hmm.
not as favorable as your individual policies. And it's not, all one or the other. Sometimes you start as own occupation for a couple years and then it switches to any occupation. And that's important to know. Again, if we're talking about the tail risk of a long-term disability, they say it's own occupation and that's preferred, but it really goes to any occupation after 2 years on claim.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So the first couple years are, can you do your specific job in which you've been employed for the full amount of hours that you normally would work versus is there any job at all that you are capable of doing?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could have that switch.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's a really big difference from one to the other. So yeah. Well, that's really good information.
Yeah, and that's where coordination of benefits is just really important. Group insurance is normally the most cost-effective way to have coverage. So even if it's not favorable, we're not keen on dropping it.
Mhm.
But making sure that if you do an individual policy, that maybe it picks up the slack where the group policy is lacking and really coordinating those two together.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Yeah, well, that's good. Well, I see here we have the causes of disabilities.
Yeah, we like to review this, and we find people find it shocking. A lot of the times we are told, I don't need this. I work a desk job. Sure, I might fall off the ladder at home, but really, I'm not going to get injured and have a disability event because my work is, white collar or all in the office.
Hmm.
And this is active claims from a life insurance company that they shared. And in 2010 or 2022, 10% of their claims were as a result of injuries. So 90% of claims that are experienced are things that you can't plan for. Sickness, illness that no one knows is coming and you can't avoid based on your lifestyle to some extent. Obviously, we could live a healthy life, but that doesn't stop things like cancer from occurring. The other thing I like to point out, besides injuries, is in the bottom right in red, mental and nervous conditions and substance abuse. So this makes up 13% of claims. It's the third highest individual category. And the reason I like to bring it up, obviously, no one that I've ever talked to thinks they'll be in this category. They'll have a mental nervous condition that disables them or substance abuse, but it happens. 13% of claims it happens to. And
Mhm.
companies like to limit benefits for this.
Wow.
And on a group plan, it's really by default, it's limited. And so we really encourage on an individual policy, you don't limit it. And you have to take affirmative action by electing a rider to not limit it. And we think that's money well spent. Then if the insurance company is trying to reduce their exposure to it, that's generally somewhere you don't want to reduce your exposure to. The
Yeah.
insurance company has big buildings to pay for. They know the risk, they have the data. If they're trying to shy away, that's probably where you should lean into, is what we see.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good information. And that opt-in, the proactive opt-in, that's a sure sign that it's probably something you really want to seriously consider.
That's right. Yeah. They
Yeah,
are not they hold all the cards, so we try and stack it in our client's favor when we can.
yeah, yeah. Is there anything else in here that kind of just, looking through this, my initial thought is, disability insurance, there's an accident, there's an injury, something
Hmm.
like that. And I see it's only 10%. So that right off the bat is just really surprising. Is there just anything else, that just with, your years of experience working with this, that you think most people would be surprised by, or a common misconception that people would have in addition to the mental, nervous substance abuse?
Yeah, I think people their mind just instantly jumps to something extreme.
Mm.
I got in a car accident, I'm completely disabled, I fell off the ladder, something that's more extreme where really a lot of claims, especially with that partial disability rider, it doesn't have to be something huge. We had a dentist that mostly just did surgery, and that was the main part of his practice. And he was starting to have issues with his hand and numbness in it and couldn't have feeling in it. And he found that if he cut, his surgeries down a little bit, that problem just went away.
Wow.
And he asked us, is that something I could have had a claim for? Well, yeah, you're doing less surgery, making less money. You have a loss of duties on the job. But, for him, it was just, I'm starting to get sore after doing this for so many years. Let me just scale back. I'm older. I'll just take it a little bit easier. And didn't even dawn on him that is a claim.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's really good. And I think that just like you said, a lot of times I would think, and probably other people would as well, that it would be something very drastic,
Hmm.
like a paralyzing injury or something like that. So yeah, that's really good information.
So why is disability insurance so important? Um, and if you do all this planning, you work with AFP, and you're talking about where do you invest your money, what's your allocation, how much should I save, what about 529 plans? But you never talk about what if my income goes away, or
Mhm.
maybe you do. Here you are, but everything in your plan is built on the foundation of assuming you have an income. And if that goes away, that's probably your most valuable asset, certainly until you get closer to retirement. And it's important to ensure that. The other thing we see as opposed to life insurance, when you pass away, you're no longer consuming, resources for the family. Whereas for a disability and claim, your expenses probably go up, at least in the short term, for healthcare costs, retrofitting the house, maybe, and an in-care nurse needs provided for to help, the spouse, so they're not taking care of the spouse and kids at the same time. It's one of those things that we've seen families had to make drastic decisions because they didn't have disability insurance, and it's extra hard because that person is still alive and they still want to care for them as great as possible. And having a little bit of extra income or replacing that goes a long way to having the family feel more comfortable and that they could actually handle this.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point. Is that oftentimes when somebody is considered disabled, their expenses will go up for obvious reasons. So that's a really good point to make.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we have clients that, want to scale back, yes, I make 100,000, but I only spend 50. Maybe I only need to insure 50. Well, maybe you consider doing a little bit more because, by the time you have a claim in 10 years with inflation and with your
Mhm.
expenses going up,
Mhm.
I've never found someone come back to me and say, man, I just had my claim. I wish I bought less.
Yeah,
It's normally the opposite. And there's
yeah.
a balancing point, but
Mhm.
in general, you want to cover the risk and cover it fully.
Yeah.
Being 90% covered is very much different than 100% covered, even that little amount.
Yeah, 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 you are absolutely right. Any good financial plan is going to have insurance in place for things like this. So, yeah, excellent point. All right, life insurance.
Yeah, life insurance, it's an easier conversation because everything is more straightforward. And for this discussion, we've limited it to talking about term insurance because we find that is what most people need.
Yep.
Your need for insurance is tied to your need for your income and that income to support your family. And I believe everyone's goal is to retire, which really means that assets have replaced the need to produce income.
Mhm.
And so once that need goes away, in one sense, so too does your need for life insurance. And so term insurance fits that perfectly because it's only around for a term of time, and you generally match it up to when you might be financially independent and no longer need your income to survive. So it
Yeah.
pays income tax-free lump sum to the beneficiaries, whoever you elect upon passing. Main components, of course, how much are you going to collect in the form of death benefit? Who are the beneficiaries? Making sure that's set up correctly. I uh, I can't tell you how many times we review clients' coverage and they forgot to change the beneficiary.
Yeah.
Um, Whether it's still the just one kid, but they had a second kid,
Hmm.
or they got a trust created, but they never went and told the insurance company to make it the trust.
Hmm.
That's We always double check it for people because we see so many errors.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually seen life insurance policies literally with no beneficiaries on it. It just pays to their estate. So, uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And this is definitely a lot more black and white than disability insurance, much fewer variables.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've even had clients, pass away on a cruise over in Europe, and it takes, a couple extra weeks for the claim to get paid, but it still gets paid. There's no fighting over it. It's
Mhm.
very clear and obvious when claim time comes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good.
But just as we talked about for disability insurance, really all this insurance is tied to replacing your income.
Mhm.
And the way we like to talk about it is obviously there's an emotional and spiritual aspect tied to everyone's life, but we're focusing on the economic only. And to put it in other terms, if you had a machine in the garage that was throwing X amount of dollars into the kitchen every year, would you insure that machine against fire and theft? Probably so. That's a pretty important machine. It's producing income for the family. And so why wouldn't you insure someone, to replace their income in the same sense, for life insurance? And the amount you need normally tied to how much you're earning and how much you need to support yourself. And we find a lot of people get analysis paralysis. That's they're trying to solve to the dollar how much insurance they need. And really, we like to first talk about pricing. Get your health information, get pricing in front of you. Because if I could tell you your insurance costs $600 per million, well, all of a sudden I'm not so worried if I need 1 million or 1,050,000 when the difference in cost is $5 or
Yeah.
$10. It just helps guide that conversation because what's most important is you have some coverage, even if it's not perfect to the dollar amount.
Hmm. Yeah. And that amount is going to change from year to year anyway. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's really good. And I think that brings up another point, and I think that might be on our next slide, is that's just part of the process of how do we get these types of insurance?
Yeah. Yeah, we could go to the next slide. How do you do it if you're really finding that you have a need for it? And the first step is review your current coverage for both life and disability. I have one more story. We were helping, they were a teacher with their disability insurance, and they had two policies. One was their STRS coverage as a teacher for the state,
Yeah.
and then they had a association policy. They're a part of a separate association that offered disability insurance to their members for an additional fee. And they came to us and they just wanted a second opinion. Does this make sense? Does this cover what we need? And in looking at the association coverage, there was a line that the benefit you receive will be reduced for any benefit received from government or other retirement system benefits,
Wow.
which to me is STRS. Um, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not trained to read legal documents, but we identified that as a concern, raised it with the client. They agreed with us, and we actually replaced that coverage with something that we knew would pay out, and it
Mhm.
was the same benefits for a lower premium. So it was just whether or not that policy would have worked or not, we replaced it for a lower cost, and now you don't have that concern.
Yeah. And now they know for sure both of those will work together.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. And
Excellent.
that's that integration of benefits, so very important.
Yeah.
Um, the second point, work with a broker. Uh, just like anything, one company is not best at everything they do.
Mhm.
And if you work with a broker, they could shop the marketplace. They could find the company that has the best policy for you. And oftentimes, health dictates where you go. If you apply to 10 life insurance companies, maybe eight of them all come back treating you in the same health. One or two might be coming back at a worse health.
Mhm.
And it's just, maybe the underwriter was conservative, maybe they saw something different. But if we know there's companies that are better than another, for example, if you smoked one cigarette in the past year, every insurance company is going to treat you as a tobacco except one. And we're going to go to that one because tobacco rates are much more expensive than non-tobacco rates.
Yeah.
So knowing that information, and if we were only tied to one company, maybe we wouldn't be able to get you those non-tobacco rates. So broker to us is very important.
Yeah. And having that knowledge from experience of how they handle each individual circumstance.
Certainly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then the final thing is all these quotes are estimates until you apply. If it's us, and I think most people do this, we try and get a lot of health information on the front end to make sure that we're reasonably accurate. But things come up, and you'll finally get a final approval after you apply and are underwritten with a company. And once you get that final approval, you get one final say, yes, I want this, or no, I don't. So a lot of the times it's let's get an application in, let's see what you're approved at. We think it's this. If it is, we continue down this path. If it's not, let's revisit and rediscuss and see if, maybe we go to a different company once we find out. And it can be a involved process. The last story I'll have for you is we had a client that applied. Um, everything came back as expected, except they pulled medical records. And in those medical records, it said he had open heart surgery 2 months prior to applying. Well, that's going to be a problem for qualifying for life insurance. So we went back to him and said, what's the story here? And he said, oh no, I definitely did not had open heart surgery. That was not me. Uh, and we believe him. We believe our clients. And so it turned out he went to his doctor, and that was incorrectly put in his medical records.
Wow.
And it was copy and pasted every time he went to his doctor, for the rest of that year. And we had to go back, get that corrected. And it turned out we got the offer we expected, but we had to go through some extra hoops. So things come
Wow.
up, it takes time, and you really don't know the final price until you get that approval from the company.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so a minute ago we talked about how, your disability insurance is limited by your actual earned income. Uh,
Hmm.
and so we know health is a big factor. Are those the two main factors when looking at both disability and life insurance, or is there anything else the insurance companies would be looking at? I'm just trying to think if there's anything that perhaps somebody has in the back of their head thinking, oh no, I could never get this type of insurance because of this, or it would be really expensive because of this.
Sure. It does happen. As far as underwriting, it is just the health and financials. That's what goes into it. But I can't tell you how many people came to us. Um, Either they thought they were uninsurable and we were able to find out they were insurable and at decent rates,
Hmm.
or, they came to us thinking this condition, can I improve upon my previous offer? And just by reshopping it somewhere else, you can. Again, everyone has different opinions. So it's not uncommon for people to think they can't get coverage, and maybe that's true, but often what the insurance company is worried about is different than what your doctor's worried about.
Yeah.
And so it's not exactly as you're told from your doctor.
Yeah. So basically, don't disqualify yourself for insurance that you need. Let the carrier do that because there's a
Yeah.
good chance you may be wrong.
And a good agent could tell you. We have a online questionnaire. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to do. And I could take one look at it and tell you if it's a for sure no.
Mhm.
And if we think it could continue, but maybe there's questions, we have resources to help us figure out where it might fall.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Very good. Yeah, well, this has been really great. Adam, thanks for sharing all this information. I did want to make sure that folks could see your contact information. So it is all there, down to the fax number. So
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it. I always encourage people to reach out. I am maybe one of few that love talking about life and disability insurance. So if you just want to call and ask questions, I'm happy to do that or help however we can.
yeah, well, thank you so much. This has been really great. A lot of great information, and thanks so much for your time.
Very welcome. Take care.
Thanks.